Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing and this is our 12 Makes of Christmas series. We are on day 11 and we are going to be quilting the tree skirt that we learned how to piece in yesterday's video. And so I'm going to talk you through the steps on how to baste it at home using fusible batting. And then we're also going to talk about how to quilt this on your home sewing machine with a walking foot, because there's no quilter who's any good who's going to be able to quilt your tree skirt before the holiday at this point. So if you want it done and under the tree this year, we're going to show you how to do it yourself. And then tomorrow, make sure you come back because I'm going to show you how to do bias binding, so that way you can go around the circled edge, and we're also going to trim everything down so that it's a nice circle, and also we're going to cut up the center seam so that way we have a nice back to slide over your tree when you are ready to go. All right, so I'm excited to get going on this. It's going to be fun. I have already layered this up, so if you need a reminder on how to layer and baste at home, we have a video tutorial that shows you how to do that on our beginner quilting series. But essentially what I've done is I've taken the Quilter's Dream fusible batting. It's a new product they've come out with. It is an 80-20, which means it's 80% cotton, 20% polyester, so it'll shrink a little bit less. And I typically alternate between 80-20 and 100% cotton. I really think they both quilt up beautifully, and it really just depends on whatever we have in the shop that is the size I need that we have in stock. So, you know, whatever, it all works really well. So there's fusible on one side of this, so you're going on to make sure that the fusible is up. And I have not put my backing on yet. I'm going to wait to do that until after I fused everything. So essentially what I've done here is I've got my batting fusible side up, the sticky side. There's a little bit of a shine to it, but it also tells you there's a nice sticker on it to tell you what it is, because we don't want to stick this to our tables. And then underneath here, I also have my pressing mat. You can actually kind of see there's like a dip down here, because I don't want to press directly on top of my tabletop because that could ruin the surface. And so I'm only going to press on top of the mat. And then I also have my spray mister, because I don't like to put water in my iron. Every iron that I've ever put water in has spit eventually, and I really love my Oliso and it does a great job, and I don't want to have to replace it if I don't have to. So what I do is I just always use my spray mister. Comes out as a fine aerosol mist like that, and so I'm able to really get a great job without using steam. And I feel like steam also can distort your fabric, and then blocks don't fit together the way they should. But it doesn't happen with this. Not sure why, but it just has never happened to me with this stuff. So this area here is over my pressing mat. I have a very large pressing mat. So I'm gonna go ahead and give that a spray. And I'm gonna go ahead and just work from the center out, just going slowly over everything so that I can fuse this to the top. All right, I've got that center good. So I'm gonna scoot over a little bit, and I'm really just working on that area that fits on top of that mat. I believe that has taken, but what I'm going to do to check it is I'm just going to kind of give it, pull back to the point where I started to work. And I'm feeling some tension here. I don't want to rip it all the way back because I don't want it to come apart, but it does feel like it has adhered, which is good. It's what we want to have happen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep moving this mat so that I can get my entire center done, and then I'm going to switch and do the sides. I'm grabbing my mat, I'm pulling it out so that I can get the side there. And I'm just gonna smooth everything back out. And again, I don't have my backing on yet. I'm gonna do that once I fuse the top, because it's only fusible on one side. So I just wanna work on the side that is going to be most important here. And I want it to really fuse nicely to that top. All right, I'm gonna work my way out. Do be careful when you get to these edges, because you don't want your iron to come in direct contact with the fusible, because then it can end up on your iron and you'll have a sticky mess. All right, so if I lift up on this, it will come off, which is good. You don't want it to be completely, you know, once it's down forever, because sometimes you need to reposition things. But I definitely, this is just kind of a temporary thing until I can get it nice and basted. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep going and get my entire center done, and then I'm gonna do my sides, and then we are going to be ready to pin the backing on. All right, so it's time to pull to the sides here, and I can see that this is like real clearly pressed down and adhered, and then you can tell that this is not because it's, you know, a little wrinkly still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down to about that point. All right, I've got that pretty well situated. I'm just going to smooth that out. You always smooth from the center out when you are layering and basting for a project on your home sewing machine, because if you got a big clump in the center and you've already done all your sides, you can't get that out. But if you go from the center and work your way out, then you can fix pretty much anything. All right, so I'm just gonna keep on going. I'm gonna press, I'm gonna do my 2 sides, and then I've got a little bit left over there, and then do the same thing on the other side. And that's all that there is to it. And then we're going to do some pinning to get our backing on there as well. But this is a great way to pin with less fuss, or to baste with less fuss, and to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to when you're working on your home sewing machine. So I've got everything fused to the top, so now it's time to go grab my backing, and I'm gonna layer that together. Should be pretty easy because this is really moving as one. The edges are a little coming up a little bit, but that won't be a big deal. What matters is that the majority of the quilt is stuck down, and it's gonna stay there until I can get it quilted up. All right, so I've laid my backing with the seam side up, and now I'm gonna bring my top and my batting back over, and I'm gonna lay it down. Now this is gonna be a lot wider with that, with the fabric doubled than it needs to be, so I'm also gonna trim this up a little bit once I get it pinned. But right now you might have a lot hanging off of your table depending on how large of space you're working with. My desk is not the ideal space, but this is where the cameras are, so we're gonna make it work. So my goal here is to line the center seam of my quilt, which is right here, with the center seam of my battings. Now if it's not perfect, that's fine. Don't worry about that. But I am just trying to do the best that I can here to keep it in line. So this next part is going to be hard to explain on camera because you need to be able to feel it. So when you smooth out, like I can feel that there is a lump here in the batting or in the backing. So I need to grab it and pull that out to smooth everything out. And I've got another one over here. And so that way I've got a completely flat surface. I'm not feeling any lumps or bumps. You shouldn't have any in the batting and the top because we did a good job pressing that. I can feel that center seam, and the rest of that feels pretty good. Okay, so I'm pretty good. I'm confident where everything is at. I've got backing fabric hanging past the top on all sides, so I'm good there. And I've got everything mostly centered. I can feel the seam. It's just a little bit to the side of where that center is. So that is gonna be good. All right, so now I'm gonna start pinning because I do need to secure all 3 layers so they stay together while I'm doing my initial quilting. Now my plan here is to quilt straight down the center. So you can see that there's a line that comes straight through here. So I'm going to go straight down the diamonds, and I'm going to go straight across on all 6 of these here first. And then that will get me where at least enough together to where I can take some pins out and then stitch the rest without having to worry too much about it. So what I want to make sure I do is not pin in any of these that I'm going to quilt through, so that way I don't have to stop and take pins out as I'm working. So essentially I'm going to do like every other one. So I'm going to quilt these guys first, and then I'm going to come in and quilt there, and it'll make more sense when we get to it. But essentially I'm going to be quilting here, so I'm going to put my pins here. Now if you're doing this on a dining room table, do make sure that you cover the surface with something like your pressing mat or something, and that way you will make sure that you won't gouge into it, because what you want to do is rock the pin down so you're catching all 3 layers and then pull it back up. So I'm going to sew this guy first and this one. So now I'm going to do this next. And it's nice if you can get these curved pins because it makes it a little easier to pull them up later. All right, now I'm gonna work my same way there too, but I'm gonna skip a row here because I wanna make sure I have enough pins to do everything. So if I'm gonna be sewing out this way, then my next row is gonna be this one, and then I can skip a little bit. And I'm gonna pin a little bit further apart on this one just because I don't think I'm going to have enough pins, and I know that I'm really secure with the top, and so it's just the backing fabric that I've got to worry about. All right, so over here, again, we're working our way out. So my next one that I would pin would be this one, but I'm gonna do every other. So I'm gonna hit over here now. That way I'm kind of hitting every other. So I've got one straight line going down the center, and then I've kind of got every other that I'm going to be working on. Essentially, just pin about, you know, a fist in between each one is good, and that will give you some pretty decent coverage on your quilt. And I have hundreds of these somewhere, but I never know where they are when I need them. That's my problem, is I can never find them when I want to have them. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working on that. And again, you always want to pin from the center out too. So I'm going to pin whatever fits here on my tabletop, and then I'm going to move it and do the outsides because you want to make sure you're smoothing and working your way out always, because you can't fix a clump in the center, but you can smooth it out as you work. All right, so I've got my center all the way pinned, so I'm gonna go ahead and just pull it toward me, just like I did when I was doing the top. And again, I'm just gonna smooth that out and just making sure and feeling to make sure that that backing fabric is nice and smooth, and it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and work my way out and to the sides. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, well, roll this up so that I can fit it underneath my sewing machine throat. But what I want to do is I want to quilt straight through the centers of all of my stars. So I'm going to follow this line all the way out to the edge here. So I know that I need to come in right here, and I'm going to be able to quilt from one end of the star all the way to the other end. And then I'm going to do the same so that I can bisect that and get all 6 of my wedges quilted straight down the center within 3 passes. And then I'll be able to quilt around with more ease on the others because I've got everything pretty much anchored in place and I have to worry less about it. Now I've got a whole lot of extra fabric here for my backing because you have to cut using with the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off so that I'm not working with so much extra, because it can get to be a little bit of a pain when you're lugging so much around. And then we're ready to get started. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm just rolling this up from the side so that I can quilt straight through that center. And I'm trying to keep it as slim as I can so that way I can flatten it out, because I'm using my very beginner model sewing machine, so that way you know that you don't have to have a big fancy machine to do this at home. But I want to be able to fit it in that throat space, which is not large, so I want to make sure I've got plenty of space. So I've now rolled it up, and I've got where I'm going to quilt straight down these diamonds. So I'm going to start way at the end, and I'm just going to work my way down, going from point to point to point until I make it all the way out the other end, because you can see when we get to that center, it just keeps on going. So I want to quilt all those straight lines first and get that done. And I'm not going to mark anything because I know I can quilt a straight line from here to here and eyeball that and make that work just fine. All right, so I've got this big quilt now to manage. And so what I'm doing here is, one, I put on some Machingers Quilting Gloves. That's gonna help me tremendously when it comes to quilting on your home sewing machine. I get questions like, how do you move it so easily? It's because of these, because you're able to really move the fabric really easily when you've got them on. Mine are various colors because of chalk pounce powder that I use often with these. It doesn't come off on the quilt later, it stays in the gloves. So what I've also put my extension table on, and that will help me as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm getting ready to go, and I am just setting that down at the tip of that diamond that I need to quilt to. So by rolling the 1/2 up, I can easily fit it into the throat of my machine. Your throat is your space between your needle and the actual base of your machine. This is not a large throat space. It is a very beginner level model sewing machine, so it's totally doable to do with a smaller piece like this. Now I could bring my bobbin thread up. I'm not going to in this case because we're going to be cutting off those edges. So I've got my walking foot on. This is incredibly important for this because it moves all 3 layers together at the same pace. And I'm just quilting, and I'm just paying attention to where where the next diamond is. And so I've made it through there, and then I'm just making sure that this next part is in line with where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go ahead and increase my stitch length to about 3.5 because it doesn't need to be as tiny for quilting stitches. And then I just let everything else kind of hang out over here, and I want as much of it to be on the table as far as the weight as possible. It'll make it easier to quilt. All right, that's moving a lot better now that I've got that larger stitch length. And about every diamond or so, I just stop and reposition, get more of that quilt on the table, because the more weight that's on the table, the easier everything is going to push through. And for hands, I put one hand on top of the roll and the other hand to the side there, and then I just help it push through. I'm letting the machine do a good chunk of the work, but I'm also giving it a little bit of oomph as well. All right, so I'm coming up to that center now where my center star is. So I'm just gonna quilt straight through it and then start onto the other half. All right, I am dead center, and because we pressed all those seams open, I had no problems getting through where all 6 of those diamonds are coming together. It just went straight through with that needle. All right, so I'm just gonna keep on going with that process until I make it all the way out to the other side. When I'm done, I'm just going to pull that back and clip those threads, because again, we're going to be cutting off the edges to make our rounded edge. So I'm not so worried about bobbin threads being a little weird at this point, because that's going to go away. All right, so I've got my first stitching line done here. So now what I need to do is re-roll, so that way I can stitch through my next line that goes into that center star. All right, so I've got the next one horizontal. This one's going to be a little bit different to roll because it's going to be at an angle, because right now our backing and stuff, that is not circular like it's going to end up being. So I'm going to start by rolling here, and I'm just parallel to where that seam is going to be is all. And then I'm just trying to keep it parallel as I work my way toward that center. All right, so I've gotten to my center, so now I'm ready to sew from the edge down. Now I forgot which one was the edge when I moved everything around, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and put a little pin up there so I know what's what. All right, so I'm following out from that center, and I'm gonna mark that so that way I know which one it's supposed to be. And actually I've already got a pin here, but I'm gonna smooth it out a little bit better. And I'm gonna replace that with a pin instead. That way I know that this is the one I need to start with, so I don't have to backtrack myself later. All right, so I'm all lined up. I've got my pin to mark where I'm gonna start, so I'm gonna take that out. And I'm gonna just get started right at the tip of that diamond and start sewing again. These first couple of diamonds are kind of the most difficult because you don't have a lot of the weight of the quilt on the desk yet. So you're doing a little bit extra work to get that to go. All right, so now I've quilted through 4 of the 6 stars. So now I'm going to repeat the process again, re-roll everything so I can quilt through the last wedge, and then we're ready to quilt each one of these one wedge at a time. All right, so I have stitched through all 3 of these, and on the last one I missed the center, but that's okay because we're going to cut out the center so that the tree stump can go there in the end. So what I want to do next is I want to start quilting so that I'm quilting in on all these lines, and then I'm going to pivot once I get to the center and work my way out. Now I'm going to go every other at first, so that way I can get this nice and secure and I can get all my pins out, because this has done a good job. This is cut it into 6 different wedges, but we've got a lot of space in between the quilting here. So I want to make sure that I'm filling that in as quickly as I can, so that way, and then I can go back and do the little stuff later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where I'm going to start here. And let's see, I want it to be every other, so we're going to skip this one and we're going to do this one next. So I'm going to work my way out so that I hit right here. So this is where I'm going to start. Actually, let me grab a pin, I'll put it in here. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to be pivoting here, so I'm not going to bother with rolling this up. At this point, I'm just going to smush and scrunch, and that is a very technical term, I know. I know others who are also equally as technical when explaining how to do this, but essentially I'm just going to quilt. I'm going to start going through here until I hit that center seam, and then I'm going to work my way out the other way, and I'm going to be doing a lot of maneuvering in here, so this is easier if you have a larger throat space on your machine, but you can absolutely do it on a smaller one. It's just going to take a little bit longer for that turn. Another good reason for going every other is it definitely will secure it enough to be able to call it done. And if you decide you've had enough, you can have enough, and you won't be like, oh my god, I have to do every single one all the way around here, I'm never going to finish. So that's one way to do it. So, all right, so I'm going to get going. It starts off just as we did before. Except when we get to where we're going to reposition, I'm also going to shove a good chunk of that quilt through as well. And I'm still going to try and flatten it out as much as I can here, and so I can keep it out of the way. But it just isn't as precise and easy as when you have a roll because you're going straight through. All right, we'll reposition. I've got a pin here, so I want to make sure I take the safety pin out. Now you would not be able to crunch and scrunch this the way we're doing had we not used a fusible batting and then also pinned and done all the basting ahead of time. It would have gotten your quilt all out of sorts. All right, I've got one more diamond, and then we're gonna switch it up and go on our way out. All right, so I'm heading into that center diamond. All right, so I'm stopping with my needle down. I'm at my center diamond, but I'm gonna lift my presser foot up so that I can easily turn. Now I gotta shove a whole lot through here because I'm gonna be going out the other direction. All right, so now I've got it to where I'm gonna be coming out that other side, so I can go ahead and put that presser foot back down, and I can aim for the next point. And just like before, you're just gonna reposition and shove a little bit more through into the side. What I typically try to do is roll it all up and push it back, and then push down with my right hand. That way I'm able to help move it along as I'm going. All right, well, I'm gonna stop the video here because that's basically what you need to know to get this done. This is how I'm quilting it. You certainly can do your own thing. We started off this series with a couple of free motion quilting video tutorials. You could absolutely do that. I'm gonna keep going the way I'm going. I'm gonna do all my wedges first, and then I'm gonna go in and hit all of those seams in between that I've left out. And then we'll come back tomorrow and I'll show you how we're gonna cut this down to be a circle, and then that slit, so that way it will wrap around the Christmas tree, and then we're going to do bias binding so that it will fit very neatly around the rounded edge. Thanks so much for following along. I hope you have really been enjoying this series. I'm gonna go quilt my little heart out to get this done so that way we can finish up the video series for you tomorrow. All right, thanks so much, and make sure you head on over to our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You guys can get all the supplies you need for this video, plus the free pattern, and make sure you're subscribed here on the channel, and you can also subscribe to emails on our website. And we'll send you a 10% off coupon code that you can use on your first purchase. Plus, then you'll get all of our email or all of our free tutorials in your inbox once a week. Normally we just do once a week, not 12 days in a row like for 12 Bakes Christmas. All right, so as I was working to finish this up late last night in the quilting, I realized that if I sewed with just the wedge I was working on underneath the throat of the sewing machine, that it worked a lot better because I had a lot less to stuff under. It cut my time in almost in half in the amount of time it took me to do each wedge, which meant I was able to finish the second half of the quilting in 1.5 episodes of the crown instead of 3. So I consider that a good deal, except for the fact that I need to watch more episodes of the crown now. So one last tip that'll help you as you're having to maneuver around as you're going in and out is to go ahead and cut off the corners of the batting and backing. It'll have less for you to maneuver with. And once you have it basted, you can do this. You don't want to do it before. And I'm still giving myself several inches outside so that way if anything shifts, I got plenty of room to work with. All right, well, happy quilting, and we'll see you tomorrow.